Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Jean-Francois Lappas, the founder or the co-founder of Wabya. Wabya is a coaching platform that connects people with the right coach for them. They aim to make coaching accessible to 1 billion people by 2033. In our conversation, we discuss how Wabya started and the meaning behind the name, the importance of coaching and the impact it can have, and dealing with burnout and much, much more. It's a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hi, Jean-Francois. Thanks for joining me today. To get started, could you share a bit about your journey that led you to where you are today?
You mean what led me to being on this podcast with you in a way, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Well, hi, my name is Jean-Francois. I'm French-Canadian, originally from Montreal, and I've been living in London, England for about 10 years now with my partner, Natasha. And what led me here? It's a very, very big question. And I was thinking about the questions that you were going to ask, and I was like, how do I sum this up? Look, I think the short way of kind of resuming my story is I never really lacked for anything when I was growing up. I was, I came from a fairly well-off family in the suburbs of Montreal, and my parents had like corporate jobs for all of their career, really. I had fun. I always had food on my table. I always had a roof over my head. I had a pool in my backyard. And I guess, being kind of a product of my background, I also followed probably a more traditional trajectory when it comes to I guess, education and then career, just because I kind of learned from the people that raised me, right? And so that implied going to the best schools that I could go to, supported by both my parents and my grandparents, but also kind of going to university after I finished college, or cégep as they call it in Quebec. I finished my uni, finished my last year of my studies in Torino in Italy, which was fantastic. And then I came back and I was like, great, what do I do? And I worked at HMV for 9 months. I don't know if anyone remembers HMV. I worked in the DVD section. I don't know if anyone remembers DVDs, actually. And then I had the benefit, I guess, of having not a family relative, but a good family friend that worked for British American Tobacco in Canada. And because of that, I got an interview with a hiring manager, and I had to jump through a number of hoops. I had to do a number of interviews, but basically that's how I started my corporate career. So I graduated with an international business degree. And then in 2006, I just started what would become a 14-year corporate career with BAT. 6 of those years were in Canada. And then the back end of my corporate career was in London at the head office. And then in 2020, I burned out. Hard crash. I think that probably happened to a lot of people with the pandemic and everything. It was a bit of a perfect storm on my side. So through it all, I kind of, like a phoenix, rose from the ashes and kind of really rediscovered myself. And out of that, figured out what I wanted to do as a result, to bring who I was into the world, in a manner of speaking. And that led me to a journey of entrepreneurship, which I've been on now for 3 years. So that's kind of the short version, but I'm sure you have a few questions that we can dive into during our chat today.
I do have quite a few questions. But at the end of your answer there, you mentioned entrepreneurship, and I'd like to just focus on that just for context before we go down the many different paths that we can go down. So in terms of entrepreneurship, you founded a company called Wabya. What is Wabya and how does it work?
Yeah, so Wabya is, I think, very important to say first and foremost. It's the product of a lot of soul searching on my part and on my business partner's part as to what we actually wanted to create. And I think that's a really, really key thing I want to get in our conversation today. I need to get across in our conversation today. It's not just a means to make money. It's like the shortest distance between who I am and what I do, right? How I kind of, for lack of a better term, make myself manifest in the world. Uh, and that just came about because, when I burned out and I crashed out of my corporate career, I think one of the biggest realizations I had was, how have I gotten to a point in my life where I'm doing something where I'm so far removed from my true self as a person? I was making six figures. I had all the corporate benefits. I was climbing, the greasy pole. My career had gone really well by many, many metrics. I was an outstanding performer for most of my career, but that just wasn't enough anymore. And so before I decided to create something new, I spent a lot of time kind of searching who I was, basically, because that's one of the gaps that I realized I had in my life. I really had never asked myself, like, what are my values? What do I believe? What's my purpose? So wabya really is a product of that search for what my values are, what my purpose is, what my vision for my life is. And what I realized was that my purpose is to help other people realize their purpose. And once I came to that realization, the question that begged itself was like, okay, that's fantastic, but how do I do this? And that's where coaching came into play. So as part of kind of my crashing exit out of BAT, I had a chat with a few coaches who asked me really, really good questions without giving me the answers to those questions, and forced me to really think about myself a little bit differently. And as I was kind of thinking about, okay, great, like I know my purpose is to help others realize their purpose, I was like, well, maybe like, what's the best vehicle for that? And I knew it wasn't about giving advice because I had somebody tell me something once which really stuck. Advice and opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, right? And they're not necessarily the right ones for you. So I was like, okay, it's not about mentoring or advice giving. What's a great vehicle for people to come to their own realizations about what's right for them? And that's what I realized coaching was that vehicle. There was a lot of discussions with my business partner because he really is the string to my kite. And we talked a lot about the practicalities of what we wanted to create. And he had come at it from a mentorship standpoint. But then we decided to pivot towards coaching. So to answer your question succinctly, wabya in its current form is a coaching platform. And you can think about it like Uber for coaching. So what we do is we pair you with a certified coaching professional that will take you from point A to point B, no matter what point B is, right? So it's coaching for all of your life's moments, whether it's career or relationships or health or family or business. Coaching covers everything. The coaching that we offer covers everything.
Great. And in terms of why coaching, could you compare it to like the other avenues you explored, like mentorship and things like that? And why do you think coaching has the biggest impact on someone's life?
Yeah, I think it really has to do with the notion of self-realization. All right. Our mission with wabya is to bring self-realization through coaching to 1 billion people by 2033. It's a big, hairy target, and Craig, my business partner, came up with that number. He's really passionate about helping people. I was like, cool, 10 years from now, absolutely, 1 billion. So it's completely feasible. Let's start with like a dozen, and then we'll see how we get on, right? But I think very importantly, I think this notion of self-realization is crucial to understand before you understand the importance of coaching. Self-realization really means two things. One, it's about discovery, right? Realizing in the sense of discovering something. And the second bit is about creating, realizing as in like, I am realizing this, I'm creating this. So coaching is a perfect vehicle because it allows you to do both. It's a forum by which you can actually explore some of the beliefs that you have about yourself, about your life, some self-limiting beliefs that you might have. It's a process by which you can discover your values, what really matters to you and what drives you. Usually those are the things that trigger pretty strong emotions, right? So if you value integrity a lot, well, people that lie will usually make you angry or upset. And then once you have that exploration bit, the discovery bit sorted, then it's about like going, great, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. Then it's about kind of creating, like, what do you want to do to bring all of those things into the world. And those are practical steps, right? So coaching isn't just this like, oh, let's just talk about like thoughts and emotions. There's like a practical component to it, which is really powerful. That gets you from point A to point B. So you establish a goal and a direction, and your coach helps you get to that direction with accountability, support, and just a forum by which you can kind of grow in a way that's relevant to yourself. So that's why we pick coaching specifically, right? Mentoring is a lot about advice giving based on an experience the mentor has had that you are looking up to. Therapy will be a lot about observing and discussing past traumas to figure out, what happened in the past to get you to where you are today. Coaching kind of like forces you to observe who you are presently, talk about who you want to be, and then look at how you want to make that happen moving forward. So it's very much about the present leading into the future.
I can relate, and what you're saying makes perfect sense because I've had a coach for a period of time and it really impacted my life, and the progress I made was huge. But coaching can be quite expensive. So I was wondering how you plan on scaling coaching to make it accessible to so many people, 1 billion people.
1 billion by 2033. Come on, Craig, let's do it. Look, it's a great question. And it's tricky from a business modeling standpoint because we want to make it accessible and affordable, right? And that means ease of access, which, this kind of forum, this virtual forum is now pretty much accessible to most people, I would like to think. And then it's a question of affordability. And that's really where we're majoring and where we're looking at making strides and headway. I think, first of all, coaching is already much more prevalent than it was. However, most coaching companies right now are targeting large corporations because, large corporations have much deeper pockets than the individual public. The heartbeat of what we're after really is kind of a B2C standpoint, right? A business to consumer standpoint. It's about going with individuals. However, that being said, it's a bit more challenging to get to, sustainable revenue when it's only individuals that are paying. So we are exploring kind of a B2C angle, a B2B business to business angle. But the heartbeat really is the direct to consumer selling that we want to do of our services. And where we've gotten to is a price point that we feel is comfortable, at least in the UK, because that's where we're starting, a price point that's comfortable and actually quite affordable versus, many coaching offerings. The ability for people to spend something on themselves that, like we're charging £40 for a foundations level coach, which is a fully certified coach. But that maybe has less than 100 hours of experience. So they've graduated from a certified program, but they're willing to take a little bit less money to kind of build their hours for their next level of accreditation. So that's one way that we're able to offer more affordable pricing. So pricing really has a lot to do with it. I think when we expand, we're going to have to look at the realities of different markets in terms of the cost of living in different markets, right? Argentina is going to be vastly different to the UK. South Africa is going to be vastly different to Canada. We've talked about all of this theoretically, but right now we found that our price point lands really well in the UK, but very crucially as well, it offers payment for the coach. So we want to make sure that we properly value the earnings of our coaching professionals that are choosing to work with us. And we've got a really fantastic team of coaches that have been sticking with us for the past year and a half in some instances, where clients have been slowly trickling in. So yeah, that's where the affordability piece sits and the democratization piece sits.
And after I did a stint with a coach, because it had such an impact on me, I considered maybe going down that path and maybe just getting an accreditation because it interests me. I also enjoy helping people. So I was curious because I've researched and looked through the many accreditations, and some are more accredited than others, if that makes sense. So do you have some sort of vetting process for your coaches? Do they have to have gone through certain coaching schools in order to be one of your coaches?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Not so much coaching schools because there are thousands of coaching
Yeah.
schools, right? Coaching academies, but it's more about the programs that these academies offer, right? So all of our coaches need to have graduated from a program that's accredited by a member of the Global Coaching and Mentoring Association. And that includes the International Coaching Federation, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and the Association of Coaching. I will tell you right now, it's an absolute alphabet soup out there. Right? I didn't use any of the acronyms because everyone would have gotten lost. But the short answer to your question is absolutely. All of our coaches have graduated are certified from a program that's been accredited by one of the top governing bodies. It's not a regulated profession, so that's quite tricky. And I think that's one of the big things to get across as well. You need to make sure that if you get a coach, they are certified from a program that's been accredited by the ICF, the EMCC, or the AC, at the very least. And that will ensure a proper framework, a shared code of ethics. These three kind of accrediting bodies share a code of ethics as well, which is why we picked that. So currently, all of our coaches have graduated from an ICF accredited program, an International Coaching Federation program.
Great. And I hear that the term career harmony thrown around, and a coach can help you get there. But do you think everyone can attain career harmony?
Another good question. I think more important than career harmony is life harmony. And I think this is, if there's anything that anyone remembers from this conversation, I really want to hammer in the point that this isn't just about your career or your work, because that is not separate from your life. You are one person, no matter where you turn in your relationships with yourself, with your family, with your friends, with your significant others. You are the same person when you talk about your finances, when you look at your well-being, when you think about your work as your business. So I guess kind of see it as maybe like, I've never used this metaphor before, so it might not land, but like you're the sun at the center of your solar system. And the pieces of your life are the planets gravitating around you. So I don't know, maybe Jupiter is your career, the Earth is your well-being. Like, think about it that way. And what you really need to think about is the holistic kind of perspective of that solar system. So yeah, we can talk about career harmony until we're blue in the face. But the fact is, if you can't find harmony with the different pieces of your life, you're not going to be able to have full career harmony. You're never going to find the perfect career. And I think another important bit here is, you can't look outside of yourself for fulfillment. Your external environment is just a reflection of what's going on internally. And I think that's crucial for people to understand.
And in terms of holistic harmony, like you mentioned with the solar system analogy, there's quite a few moving parts that need to be in balance for you to feel like you're in holistic harmony. So where do you begin? Because that can be really overwhelming.
Well, let me ask you, Byron, like, when you think about the harmony of your life currently, like, where are you feeling a bit of imbalance? Or maybe throwing back the question is like, where did you start to restore harmony in your life? Kind of what led you to creating this forum, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what led me to starting this podcast. And I feel like I'm not in complete harmony, but intentionally so, because I've chosen to prioritize certain things at this point in my life and let other things not be as much of a priority, if that makes sense. So in my opinion, I feel like it's important to understand that things aren't in balance, but it has to be intentional or else it can spiral out of control. But yeah, I'm no professional.
Well, you're a professional human, right? And I think one of the key elements here is that there's literally, out of 7 billion people on Earth, there's no one like you. You're the only you that there is. And so everybody's experience of the world is absolutely incomprehensibly unique. That's point number one. But the beauty of life is we all live on the same planet in society. And when we look at ourselves from a societal perspective, we realize that there's a lot of shared experiences. We experience love, we experience fear, and all the emotions that come from that. We struggle with career, relationships, health, and we have all of these questions, right? And, you know, if I want to answer your question very, very clearly in terms of harmony, like where do you start? I don't know that full harmony is fully achievable. Because if it were, then I guess you'd be Buddha or something, right? Like you'd have transcended. You probably wouldn't be here. I think part of our job, this is interesting because there's a career link here, right? We're talking about career, right? Talk about work. What's our work? Well, our work isn't necessarily to work 9 to 5 at, I don't know, Dunkin' Donuts or at a coaching company or, or anywhere else really. Our job is to kind of make sure that we find as much peace and harmony in our lives as possible, balancing all of these elements in a way that makes sense to us. I think that's everybody's job. I think the problem is we get bombarded with external stimuli that basically tell us that we're fucking up continuously. You're not pretty enough. You're not good enough. You're not successful enough. Whether that's in conversations with people that are really close to us, hopefully not that often, but very much on social media as well, or in films, all these beautiful people living these like lavish lives. Thank God there are films that show like struggle and difficulty and the notion of overcoming those struggles and those difficulties. I'm probably rambling a bit now, so I'll bring it back
No,
to you for further comments.
no, I agree with you. And a lot of coaching is about trusting the process, but it's easier said than done. So like, how do you get people who are interested in coaching or start but don't see results just yet to do just that, to trust the process? Are there steps to take?
Again, I think what comes up for me when you ask me this question is the paradox, right? If we all agree that life is actually the biggest process, right? Our whole life is a process leading to the inevitable conclusion to everyone's life, which is death. Um, Coaching and trying to figure ourselves out is just kind of part of that. And coaching is just kind of a vehicle to help you along with that process. So we're on a process from the minute we come out of the womb, essentially. So I think that needs to be really, really clearly stated. And our job is to figure out who we are and what we do about that over the course of, let's say, 100 years. So when you think about it, is figuring out the right first step in the process the most important thing? Probably not, because you're already, I don't know, 2 decades, 3 decades into your process. I'm 5 decades into mine, 4 or 5 decades into mine. So if you look at it with that perspective, then really you can think about coaching as just someone that can help you maybe move a little bit faster along the path, right? Or be a little bit clearer as to the speed at which you're moving and why you're moving in that direction. Because coaching isn't really about leading you in a specific direction, right? Another analogy that we sometimes use is the notion of going on a road trip. Okay, I'm getting in the passenger seat with you. You're picking a direction, and I'm just going to kind of like help you get there. And we might get to a point where you're like, okay, we have to go through a jungle and there's machetes that are needed. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm here with my machete, but like, do we need to do this? Like, why are we doing this? My job is kind of to interrogate a little bit, like what you believe is the right thing. And through that, then you can start going like, well, hang on a second. Maybe going through the jungle with all the crazy animals and like all the, vegetation is not the right way. Maybe I could use like that path that's right there, or maybe I need to go through the desert instead. But ultimately, I guess I want also to answer your questions practically. If you're going to get into coaching, you need to want to see something change. There's something that's like not feeling quite right. You want to progress towards a point, but you're not sure how to get there, or you're not even sure what that point might be. But I think step one is that sense of like, there's just something that's off. I'm not really quite clear on what that is or why that is. And a lot of people do this on their own, right? Self-help books, listen to podcasts, watch master class or TED Talks. And God knows I did a lot of that during my burnout. It's just that really we're social creatures, and doing it with someone, it's just a lot easier because you get somebody else's perspective, and not only somebody else's perspective, you get somebody else's professional perspective, somebody who's worked with hundreds of people and has seen all sorts, but also operates within kind of like a certified framework. So succinctly put, step one, there's friction. you just don't really, you can't put your finger on it, or you're open to exploring getting some help. And I think that's a really big point as well. A lot of people feel like getting help is like admitting to being weak or failing. I would argue the contrary. I think the biggest sign of you growing as a human being is going like, you know what? I cannot do this on my own. I need somebody to give me a hand.
Yeah, I can relate to that. What the most valuable part of the coaching sessions I had was being called out on my own bullshit. And um, by saying that, I mean, I didn't even know that a lot of the excuses I was making were excuses. I thought they were valid. I thought they were a necessary obstacle that was holding me back, but it was an idea that I'd formed in my head, and I then saw it as an obstacle when it actually wasn't one. And just simple questions and pushing back, like, oh, wait, why do you think that? Or why do you think that that's a necessary obstacle and you can't go around that? Or why do you have to go in that direction? And it almost like put me on the back foot when I was first asked. I was like, what, that, yeah, I don't know. I hadn't gone deep enough to actually give it a second thought. And I just thought it was there and it made perfect sense to me, but it was actually me making excuses.
Look, man, like I'm getting goosebumps when you're talking about that, because I think you're hitting two things. The first one and the last bit of what you said is like, it can be extremely self-confronting. So if you're not ready to face some of your bullshit, then coaching might not be for you, right? So it does take like fortitude and courage to kind of get into that journey and stick with it. But the other bit is this notion of not knowing that you don't know. That's like mind blowing, man. Because and the way I've talked about it with clients is like it's almost like you're in the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
If you remember, Morpheus says something to the effect is the Matrix is the world that's been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. The reality, it's not robots, we're not batteries for robots. It's just like we've created this construct about our own selves that we've pulled over our own eyes. And we've just gotten to believe that. I can't do that. I'll give you a practical example. When I was at BAT, probably in 2017, 2018, 2019, kind of going up the ladder and like getting more money and like, being validated by really menial small things. Great PowerPoint presentation, JF. Well done. Do you know what I mean? I remember telling myself, well, this is it. This is what I need to be doing. And I keep on this trajectory. And I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't be an entrepreneur. I mean, this is like 2024 and I have been like working on this business for 3 years and I am an entrepreneur. So I had created this notion that I was not this thing. I was this other thing. And then through a process of self-realization that I, did myself, but with the help of other people, including coaches, I just created a new reality for myself. One of the greatest benefits I have seen or observed from getting older is realizing how much I don't know as I'm getting older. Every year, I know less than I did the year before. And I think it's very important for people to be aware of their lack of knowledge, and that includes self-knowledge. But once you become aware of something about yourself, it's really impossible to put that back in Pandora's box. You can convince yourself that you don't know, but like you can't trick yourself over extended periods of time. And what's going to happen is you're going to start feeling that kind of disconnect and that friction, and it's just going to be really difficult to ignore it. And people like drink and do drugs, eat too much, do too much exercise to pull themselves away from confronting some of these internal elements. So yeah, you have to kind of want to get on the journey, knowing that you will never be fully aware of everything that you don't know. And that's why I think it's really important to kind of start any, self-realization journey with an internal discovery. Because you're the only expert on yourself in the world, man. Like there's no one else that is you. So if you don't know yourself, how can you expect anyone outside of you to tell you who you are and how you should behave and what you should do, including, by the way, your parents? We're not going to get into therapy territory, but like there's tons of people dragging tons of traumas associated with their parents through sometimes no real active fault of the parents. Sometimes, yes. But, you know, it's not your parents' fault that you're doing the things that you're doing right now, no matter how much you might want to believe that. Again, sorry, a bit of a ramble, but there's like so much good shit in what you were saying.
Yeah, and I agree with what you just said. There's an interesting story I heard about how we sort of do things that our parents did without even questioning it. And like one example was um, a lady would cut the corners off a sandwich in a specific way whenever she made sandwiches without questioning it. And then she thought for a second, I'm going to ask my mum why she used to do it. And her mum couldn't answer. And then her mum asked her mum, and she was like, oh, that was the size of the Tupperware. So I had to cut your sandwiches in that size. There was no real reason behind it, but it's just passed on from generation to generation. And you don't even question it. And I've heard so many countless examples of those type of stories where you just think it makes sense and you create a story behind it, but it actually doesn't. It made sense decades ago.
Yeah. Like, what do you think are maybe some of the things that you're still doing unconsciously?
Something that I'm doing unconsciously, and one of the reasons why I started this podcast was it's a process of unlearning. I feel like I've been socially conditioned through my education system. I had a similar sort of educational trajectory as you did, the traditional sort of kind, and I feel like I was trained to work a 9 to 5. But I don't gravitate towards a 9 to 5 as much as entrepreneurship. But there's a whole lot of baggage involved with that training. And so there's a lot of fears and assumptions that it's the riskier route. And it probably won't work out. Am I completely on my own? How do you sort out taxes? And like, there's so many things that are framed as like a fearful taboo, but speaking to people like yourself and entrepreneurs, I'm learning that it's actually not as daunting and scary as it may seem. And that's purely because of my training.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing because, mate, I am like, there's always like terror. I just want to be crystal clear to you and to anyone listening is like, the self doubts are always there. They are.
Yeah.
And I think I'm getting coached right now. And I think where I am on my coaching journey is just starting to realize that that's just a fact of life. You will always have a voice in your head that's going, this isn't going to work, or what if this doesn't work, or what if this happens and you don't know how to do this, you've never done this, or they're going to say no. I had this happen this morning. I woke up early to go to the toilet, came back to bed, and I was like, cool, got to go back to sleep, and couldn't sleep for like, an hour just because I had these thoughts in my head. But rather than fighting them, one of the things I'm starting to do is just kind of go like, okay, cool. This is just part of me. I'm always I kind of seen as like, I'm always going to have this selfless being, right? This being of light in a way that's like, I want to like help everyone self-realize. I want to, make the world a better place, and I want to give and give and give. And I'm always going to have this very selfish, part of myself that goes like, you're wrong. This is fucked. This is what I think you should do. It's that voice in your head that just is a terrible judge. If you look back on the track record, they've failed and they've been wrong so many times. And I'm saying it's really me, right? It's kind of like that selfish part of me. And that selfish part of me is like, mine, give me, give me, give me, give me. But I think it's very yin and yang, man. Like, you need that white part for that black part to be there as well, for the whole to be there. And I don't want to get tripped up in my psychotherapy terms here, but it's probably like, there's probably something about like the ego, the super ego, all those bits, right? But I really do see it as like, and this is, I think, very important because I'm on this journey like right now. This is what I'm being confronted by. It's like, this isn't something that's separate to me. And I don't know why I've been fighting this for so long. It is just part of who I am. So the doubts and the fear, I think, have to be there. I think it's just a function of like how you accept them for what they are. Maybe it's fuel or motivation or caution, right? Just like, be careful. What about this? What about that? But I'm trying to kind of like, the image I have in my head is, instead of doing this and pushing back, it's more about putting my arm around that JF voice that talks to me about everything that's inevitably going to go wrong. And at the end of the day, I think my wife had, I had a very like rough start to the year because I gone out of the gates in January. I was like, great, selling coaching and selling self-realization. It's going to be amazing. We're going to make so much money, and Craig's going to be able to leave his full-time job and do this full-time with me, and we're going to save lives and change lives. And then like 2 weeks in, like no one was ready for anything, in the second week of January. And I hit a wall. And that lasted for like 3 weeks. And at some point, my wife looked at me and she was like, what's the worst case scenario? It's a very coaching question.
Okay.
And I was like, well, this absolutely falls down, completely. It fails miserably, which means we don't have any clients. We have to pack it all in, which means like the money that we've, because we're self-funding, the money that we've put into this goes in the garbage. And then, I guess I have to go back to finding a 9-to-5 just to make sure we can, keep a roof over our head and food on our table. And she looked at me, she's like, okay, cool. If that happens, are you going to be the same person that you were in 2020 when you were burning out and before all of this started? And I was like, no, I'm not. And then I realized like, this has been such an incredible journey and I've learned so much about myself. And this is kind of what pisses me off about this like internal voice. It's kind of like, man, like, can't you be on my team? I just want like a raw situation here. You need to be my cheerleader and go like, hey, great, good job. But I think it's just part and parcel of being human.
Yeah, I agree. And at your time at BAT, what was there a catalyst that led to the burnout, or was it sort of a compounding effect?
Whenever I talk about this, I'm really mindful that everyone had a shit 2020. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think no one was like, woo, this is fantastic. But I think the macro external situation was just compounded by a succession of increasingly micro elements leading all the way down to my core, my fundamental being. So it was like macro external environment. And then there were like so many massive changes at work at BAT. My manager's manager change, and my manager's manager change, my manager change, and it was all new for a variety of reasons. And then we started working from home, and I had never done this job before, the new job that I was doing, and I had no one. I felt I was drowning continuously. And I think that was just precipitated with kind of like, I think 2019 kind of leading me up to that feeling of like disconnect. So there was also this internal turmoil. So I think it was just a perfect storm of a lot of things. In many ways, it reminds me almost like of a breakup I had, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, the way of feeling like completely lost at sea and not knowing, like feeling completely unmoored. But you know what? And you touch the bottom and then you kind of go, great, push back up, right? So I wouldn't say that there was any specific things. And looking back, I've got no grudges, or I don't have any ill will towards this business that kind of like funded my life for 14 years. And in fact, through it and through the roles that allowed me to do, I learned so much of the tools that I'm currently using in building this business, right? Like towards the tail end of my career, I was working with, the executive directors of the global business, and then the non-exec directors of the global business, right? The people at the top, basically. And I was working with their functions, right, internally a lot. So I understood really what needed to happen across multiple different functions across the business, right? From an HR standpoint, ops standpoint, finance standpoint. So that gave me like so much understanding of kind of what needed to be set up from a business standpoint, what I needed to generally understand from each function, because my role was also to communicate. So I had to understand what was going on in order to relate it to kind of, 55,000 employees across the business. So nothing precipitated anything. I think it was just a succession of things. And then, things kind of just fell down. And I didn't when I say I crashed out of that job, it wasn't a lot of people that I spoke to before I handed my notice were like, no, like use the business and your opportunity within the business to kind of like get yourself to your next move. But I was like, no, I can't do it anymore. I needed to hand in my notice. And then with that accomplished, be faced with the fact like, okay, what do I do next? Which is not what I would recommend anyone do, right? Absolutely. Use your current job to help you towards your next move. But I don't know, I didn't have that luxury, or I wasn't presented with that luxury, I felt. It was urgent. And I needed urgent psychological help as well to help me with that burnout. And BAT paid for the therapy to kind of help me, start getting out of that mental and emotional place I was in. So yeah, it was an experience I don't necessarily wish to repeat, but it made me a stronger person, and it made me into the person I am today.
And speaking of recommendations, are there any that you'd give someone who is close to burnout or feels like they may be getting to that point? And is there anything you'd put in place to try prevent that? Or what? Yeah, what did you say?
Yeah, you're asking me this question, and this goes back to what I was saying about advice and opinions before, right?
Yeah,
I can't give you a professional opinion on burnout because it's not my job. I can give you a personal opinion on burnout. I think my answer probably lies somewhere along this notion of awareness, a notion of awareness. You need to be aware of what you're feeling. I think a lot of people probably have dealt with burnout or are dealing with burnout, and it's just becoming normal. So they're starting to chalk up these feelings of anxiety, right? Squeezing on your chest or pressure on your chest, your shoulders hurting because you're bunching them up, really poor sleeping patterns. You need to be able to pick up on these clues. Leverage the people around you as well. Hey, have I changed? Especially if you're a significant other. Like, have you noticed anything different? Um, and then once you're kind of like starting to not lie to yourself anymore about maybe there is something wrong, then it's seeking objective support. Okay, I think something's wrong. My significant other, my friends who know me quite well, who might be a little bit blind, are also noticing something. I shouldn't ignore those red flags, and I think then it becomes about seeking help, right? Whether it's therapy or a coach. And by the way, I just want to be clear as well, right? You might go like, "Hey, I'm not feeling like I'm well right now, and I need to like think about my future." Great, get into a coaching session. All coaches should offer a free coaching session to begin with, right? We certainly do, but by the way, this is like a recommendation. Always have a taster session to make sure that there's chemistry there. But during that taster session, it might come to the fore, which it has in a few instances with some clients, that coaching really wasn't the right thing. And this is where a certified coach would also be able to pick up on those signals and go like, actually, would you be willing to consider therapy? And these are the reasons I'm saying this. And there's a referral process that we're trained on as well. Not necessarily with a specific therapist, but at least to point you in the right direction to find the resources that you might need. Because I think in many cases, burnout needs to be dealt with from like a therapy standpoint. I'm not exactly sure exactly the type of therapy, whether it's like CBD or like those kinds of therapies. But yeah, it starts with awareness. You need to kind of recognize that something's wrong and not keep pushing it down. So if you're feeling off, whatever your off is, it might be painful to consider, but you might want to take a good look at yourself in the mirror and go like, what the hell is going on? Why am I always feeling anxious? Why is there always that, like, I call it a nervous feeling. It's that like little nervous feeling that you have and you're not really sure, there's not any specific reason, and you're always a little bit like skittish, like a horse about to bolt or something. I think that's a pretty good indicator that you need to kind of maybe look at what's happening.
yeah. But even in that skittish feeling, it's sometimes very scary to do that introspection and look towards yourself, because there may be some signals that that something needs to change. But as soon as you do that, you may have to make some really radical changes.
I guess, what comes up for me when you say that, it's not a good analogy. I was thinking about like the torture where there's like a drop of water like dropped on your head, right?
Yeah.
It isn't a good analogy. I guess my point is, the question to ask yourself might be like, is this something I want to live with for the next 50 years of my life? Am I willing to live with this like annoying discomfort? Or am I okay with like ripping the band-aid off and going like, great, let's confront this? My personal view is ripping the band-aid off. It's going to open a whole host of possibilities about yourself you might not have considered. So yeah, it might be hard to confront reality, but what is the alternative? Like, do you want to be on your deathbed at 95 going like, well, this has been a fucking slog?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or do you want to be, I don't know, I've really kind of lived up to my potential. I've discovered it, fulfilled it. nothing left on the table, right? Like, and I think most people, after a moment of reflection, would probably rather have the second option than the first option.
Yeah, I agree. And what kind of impact has wabya had so far? Do you have any examples of the impact it's had on people?
Well, I think first and foremost on myself and my co-founder, giving us a vehicle to self-realize, to actually put ourselves out in the world and actually promote through concrete actions the changes that we aspire to promote, right? Through our values. We have 5 values with wabya. We have openness, curiosity, courage, integrity, and unity. And we make all our decisions based on those values. And they're really important to us. So I think that's number one. We've had an impact on our own selves. And every coaching client that has come through the doors has left with a new realization about themselves. It's a very unique and individual journey. I'm not saying here that you're going to get, coaching and suddenly it's going to be like, you're going to be like Superman or Superwoman or super person if you're not identifying as a man or a woman. But there will always be a shift. There is always a shift. That is something I can guarantee. And sometimes you just need a tiny nudge, right? A tiny shift to promote those bigger changes down the line. What's it saying about, a butterfly beating its wing in Tokyo creates, a thunderstorm in London or something like that. I think you have to see it like that. Just taking that action and going through that process, even if it's not for a full coaching journey of like anywhere between 6 and 12 sessions, even just a handful of coaching sessions can really help you see things differently because you're professionally accompanied by somebody who's an expert at conversing. And actually, the other thing that you're paying for when you get coaching is someone who would give you their undivided attention. We're talking like active listening for 45 minutes to an hour. No one on earth ever does that. Your best friend, your mom, your dad, like you don't even give yourself 45 minutes of undivided attention. Our coaches are literally paid to really observe you. And I'm not just saying what you're talking about. Like they're part of our training is also looking at your body language, right? So for example, a lot of people will talk about uncomfortable things and they'll touch their necks like that. They won't even realize it, but a coach will bring it up, go like, oh, it's not just you touch your neck or you've been touching your throat or you've been, rubbing your chest. What's going on inside? And that's kind of that mind connection body that we just start missing out on. Nobody really lives inside their body. We're really in our heads all the time, right? So the benefits of all of that are incredible. So we've got testimonials on our website. And actually, I'm going to be over the next few weeks recording video testimonials because we really want people to hear from actual clients about their experience, unvarnished, right? Like, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Would you do it again? What would you change? Would you recommend it? So I'm going to be starting to record some of those, and we're going to be starting to put those on our platforms, our social media platforms. But yeah, that's kind of my answer to that.
Great. And I agree with you. It is actually very rare to have someone commit 45 minutes to you, to give you that undivided attention. And that was also another piece that I took from my coaching sessions was like, this is crazy. And no one listens to you and tries to solve your problems like a coach does. It's crazy. And
I just want to jump in here. I just want to make sure that we're clear on the words that you use, right? This isn't about a coach solving your problems. It's about a coach helping you figure out if you have problems, what those problems might be, why those might be problems, and then deciding whether or not you want to actively have a solution for them. This is absolutely fucking critical, Byron. A coach is not there to solve your problems. You have to always remember, whoever's listening, you're the expert on yourself. Your coach is there to help you kind of explore that and externalize all of that. Sorry to jump in.
No, that makes sense. My mistake. I suppose I use those words because it felt like the impact they had on me was so huge to me. And also maybe it's sort of a coping mechanism that I still need to do work on. I'm sort of offloading the progress I've made to someone else and giving them the credit for it because I can't acknowledge that I'm capable of that, possibly. I don't
Oh
know.
my God. Well, can we get you to acknowledge right now, like the progress that you've made? Are you able to say like, hey, this is what I've accomplished? Like, could you rhyme off a few things that you're really proud of having accomplished on your own?
Well, one example would be this podcast. I mean, 40 episodes in, when I started and doing it all on my own, I suppose hearing other people speak about starting their podcast experiences and how difficult it was, and they usually have someone else doing it with them, at least one other person. And so I've done it all on my own, and so I'd say I'm proud of that.
Absolutely, mate. Listeners, I'm doing finger snaps here, but like, please let's give some props to Byron. But most importantly, man, I think one of the big missing pieces of most people's lives, and by the way, this includes me, right? Because I don't have, the knowledge or I don't have the answers to everything, but being able to look at ourselves in the mirror and go like, good job. You fucking had a great day. Like, how often do people do that? Almost never. It's like we're shy of just being with ourselves and patting ourselves on the back for stuff that we've done that we know is good work. And I just want to say as well, Byron, like, you've obviously created this vehicle as a means to self-realize. I think that's clear for me. But along the way, you said, I think 40 episodes in, I think you've brought the journey to a number of listeners, right? And also to your guests, given them the opportunity to tell their story and kind of, I guess for me right now, reflect on where I was and where I am now, and kind of like, I want to give myself on the back because I've had a journey and here I am. And after this, when we hang up or whatever it is that we need to do, I'm going to go take a look at myself in the mirror and say, good job, JF.
Great. That's great to hear. And thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. And I was
Yeah, close.
curious, how frequently do people who go through their coaching sessions actually change careers? Is that quite common?
I've had, I don't have a percentage for you. I've had a handful of people as a result that have gone like, nope, this isn't right for me. I'm going to do something else. I've also had a handful of people who are going like, yep, this is absolutely fine. I'm using this to get me to where I want to be. This is a tool. And I think that's a really cool perspective to think about. It's like your company, if you're working for a business, your company doesn't own you, right? They're paying you for your time, which by the way is the most valuable thing that you have in life because everybody's got the same amount of time, right? 24 hours in a day. So if you are choosing to be paid for that time, you can also use this company for your benefit. Your employer should be a tool that you use to get yourself to where you want to go. I think a lot of people forget that, right? It's all about the vision, the mission, and the values of the business. Like, what is your vision? What's your mission? What are your values? And how can your employer help you get to where you want to go?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so you obviously made that shift from BAT into starting Wabya. Have you had to overcome any hurdles when starting?
Yeah, there are hurdles. I want to be quite careful in how I say this. I'm a big believer in, manifesting words being quite powerful and actions being even more so, right? So there are thoughts, there's words, and there's actions. Um, to answer your question blank face, it's like, yeah, there's hurdles every day, man. Like, but actually a lot of the hurdles are probably self-created. I think there's going to be an issue, right? This is the voice in my head going like, they're not going to say that or they're going to do this. And 9 times out of 10, the voice is wrong. It never goes off or rarely goes off exactly as this voice has predicted it. So I think a lot of the things are in my head. But practically, it's just kind of like cracking on in the realities of, starting a business from the ground up. There's practical things, legally and financially. There are moral things. How do we stick to our values? Do we increase our prices? Do we increase our margins? Do we pay the coaches less? There's all these considerations, but I think one of the key things is if you do that in line with who you really are, the hurdles don't really become hurdles, or rather you can just step over them instead of feeling like you need to continuously jump. I think the other issue with kind of like thinking about hurdles or challenges is you tend to create or see them as bigger when you imagine them than they actually are. And that might even prevent you from getting started on something. So whilst we address challenges that we have or challenges that we're having, I think Craig and I are really good as well as keeping each other going, like, encouraging each other and giving the other perspective. So whether it's him that's feeling a bit down or challenged, or whether it's me that's feeling a bit down or challenged, our communication is excellent. In fact, I dare say, like, outside of my wife, he's the closest person to me in my life. He's like my partner in a business sense, where my wife is like a partner in a life sense. I'm slightly contradicting myself with the whole work life thing, but like, yeah, Craig is like my work wife in a way, basically, for that part of my life. But we keep each other to account. So I would say, if you have the opportunity to do that with someone, if you want to take a leap into entrepreneurship, I think you just need to find like the right person. And there's never been any doubt that it's been like Craig was the right person for me to start working on this with.
And how did you and Craig meet?
We met at BAT. He was a lateral colleague working in another department and function. Um, Craig is really such an interesting person. Maybe you'd want even to have a bit of time with him, actually. That might be really interesting. Do a 1-2 punch, a wabya 1-2 punch. But Craig is very, whereas I'm very like outward, right? Like I can tell a story, tell a tale, Craig is very much about like getting people to lean in, right? He's very good at like, he's a bit more of an introvert. He's very quiet. He's very reflective. I think he just met me because he wanted to, and he's very much about helping people. He's not from a well-off background at all. He grew up in quite a poor area in Durban in South Africa. And throughout his whole life, he's really wanted to positively impact people's life. That's what really drives him. That's why he came up with this 1 billion number, right? To him, it's all about helping people grow, helping people out of their circumstances to the circumstances that they want. And so I think, he just puts a lot in perspective, and he completes me. I can't believe I just said that, but yeah, it's the truth. He is the string. He's the string to my kite. So our meeting, it was an immediate kind of connection. But I have to be completely honest, he's the one who reached out of the blue, right? When I originally had this idea, like, oh, maybe a coaching platform would be fantastic because there are so many important opportunities in the market. I just had this kind of like kite-like vision, right? I was like, I can see that in the future, it's going to be so beautiful and everything. And then a week later, unprompted, I get a message from him going like, hey, I've got something I want to present to you. And he came up with like a 25-slide PowerPoint presentation. And it was this mentor-mentee connecting platform. And I just sat here listening to him and I was like, this is insane. Because that's exactly what I was thinking about. And you've actually done the research and you've like string-wise, practically said, these are kind of the things we need to think about, size of the market, total available market, all those things. I was like, I'm fully in. Can we just do coaching instead of mentoring? And he was like, cool, let's do it. So I have to say, I think it's a question of like individually coming together and like our paths kind of, becoming parallel, but also the universe going like, great, guys, you're ready for this. Here are all the things that you need. And I love that. And I have to really be clear on this. Like, I do believe that once you get out of your own way, the universe conspires to kind of like give you the things that you need to make things happen for yourself.
That's an amazing story. And what has been the most memorable or best part about starting Wabya? I know that's a tough question, but does anything come to mind?
That's a good question. There's been like so many milestones, right? Our first paying client, our first kind of like contract with Benefits Hub, our first coach that we onboarded, the first time we had our brand. We're really proud of our brand. Like, it's so real. It's so us. We have a Miro board that is, if you zoom out, I think if it was like a real board, it would be the size of like a wall in a house. We have like arrows everywhere, inspiration from these brands and these logos and these color palettes taken from like the Wizard of Oz. And yeah, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. We are so proud of like the brand that we've created. It's interesting because we don't have a lot of money for marketing, and also like Meta and Google are just money pits, right? You can just throw money and never see it again. But one thing that's come out from the little amount of money we've put into our marketing is how sticky our brand is, the conversion rate. Like, people really resonate with it. And so, those are all milestones that I'm really proud of. I think very crucially, probably the actual answer to your question is just how close it is to both Craig and I as individuals. There's not any distance between wabya. Wabya, by the way, is an acronym, right? There, as you can imagine, there are no domain names left with the word coach available on the internet, the whole internet. So we had to come up with something else. And also we were quite clear from the outset that the end game here isn't to build a coaching business. It's to build a self-realization business, right? Our purpose is to basically bring self-realization to as many people as we can so that we can level up the collective, right? So self-realization in order to bring up collective realization. That's a never-ending kind of task. Yeah, we're never going to achieve it, but that's kind of like our purpose and our vision, a world where every individual can get closer to self-realization so that everyone around them can benefit. And so we can raise up the collective level. We just had to come up with like, okay, well, what's the best vehicle, right? We come up with coaching. We had to like pick a lane. And so it's very, very important to remember that this isn't just a coaching business. It's a self-realization business. And for that reason, we were kind of riffing on different names and nothing was really sticking. And then Craig, growing up in South Africa in Durban, which is basically in the territory of the Zulu tribe. And from that Zulu tribe originated this notion of Ubuntu, which is a South African-born philosophy that embraces the notion of the individual within the collectives and how indivisible those two things are. You can't exist without others, and others can't exist without you. If you think about that statement, it's actually, theoretically and spiritually true, but it's also practically true. There wouldn't be society without people, and there wouldn't be people without society. And Craig kind of grew up with that as part of his upbringing, right? Like his kind of like, spiritual landscape in a way. And so he was kind of riffing. He's like, well, Ubuntu is really about I am because you are. And, for example, if I have something to eat and you don't, and I give it to you, then actually it's going to help you and I'm going to benefit from that, right? By being selfless, I'm actually being selfish, which is kind of like a crazy paradox, but it's actually true. By giving, I'm receiving because I'm raising up people around me and they'll be able to raise me up in turn. And then after a few bits of riffing, we came up with we are because you are, which is very, very close to I am because you are, but also kind of has a link to we are as a business, right? As a corporation, as a legal entity, as a legal person. We can't exist without our clients and our coaches and our colleagues. And those are the three pillars of the business, the three C's: clients, coaches, and colleagues. And then we were like, okay, great. That is a very long name. And then my background in communication has left me with a professional defect, which is really to make everything out of an acronym. Make an acronym out of everything if I can. And immediately I was like, WABYA, we are because you are, wabya. And then Craig kind of like chewed on it for a second and he was like, I like that. And it works perfectly because it's not like, coachingsareus.com or anything like that. It's like wabya.com. It's we are because you are. There's a deep rooted connection to obviously Craig's upbringing, but also it dovetails perfectly with this notion of self-realization in order to bring about collective realization. So the connection with the purpose and the vision is like right there. It could be more perfect. And eventually the vision that we have for this business, we used to talk about it as like the Amazon of well-being, but I think we've grown to see that this is like quite transactional. So lately I've been seeing a bit more, and it's not a perfect analogy, but like I've got a really good mate who works at Spotify, and I was thinking like maybe the Spotify of well-being, but basically what that would mean practically is a space where people can pick and select what they feel is best for them in terms of their own well-being. And maybe coaching is an entry point for that. You come out of coaching and you're like, well, I could use a bit of help to get in shape with, a sports coach, or I just want to work on my weight. So maybe there's a dietitian, maybe you need breath work, maybe you need yoga, maybe you need therapy. And the way that I see that practically happening is eventually a collective or cooperative of like-minded businesses that work together, and even maybe like a profit share in order to give back to the community, right? So each business kind of like grows as the community grows. That's kind of the longer term vision. But for now, we have fantastic coaches that can help you get closer to self-realization. So, just drop us a line.
Great, amazing. And to end every episode, Jean-Francois, I usually ask my guests if they have a question for me.
What did you learn during our conversation, or what are you walking away from with?
Um, I learned a lot, but the main thing is it just confirmed my thoughts on coaching and how valuable it is, and that it's so valuable to have someone on your team asking you the right questions, calling you out on your excuses and problems, and just opening your eyes to those things can help you make so much progress so much quicker, just having a team member. And so I definitely need to consider going back to coaching because I know how valuable it was to me. So that's my main takeaway. But yeah, I learned a lot from this conversation and really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for giving me a platform and a forum to speak openly about this. I really enjoyed it, and we could talk after after the recording about the coaching bit. You want to get into a discovery call. Here's another question for you then. I'm being cheeky. I'm going with two questions. Like, what are you going to do practically from this conversation, right? What are you going to do practically to kind of like move closer, maybe a step closer to where you want to be?
So there's two things. One is possibly get another coach, and the other is looking back at my previous coaching sessions. I feel like there are some things that I didn't follow through with, because you pay for X amount of sessions, and so that last session for me was left a bit open-ended, and I had to hold myself completely accountable going forward, and I feel like I didn't. And so I need to sort of check myself, do some introspection, and follow through with some of those bits that I promised, because I owe it to myself to do that.
I have nothing to add. It seems like a great punctuation mark on her chat.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Jean-Francois. I really did enjoy this conversation. If people want to find out more about Wabya and you, where can they do so?
So wabya.com, that's wabya.com. You can find us on Instagram and Threads at We Are Because You Are. And I think we're on LinkedIn as well under Wabya. So we've got a bunch of socials and we've got a website. By all means, drop us a line, reach out. Don't be shy, even if it's just to ask questions. I need to really stress, obviously, there's an economical component to us doing this, right? We'd like to see a return, but like really what drives Craig and I is giving people a hand in whatever it is that they need help with. And whatever part of your life that you feel you might be struggling with, just remember you're at the center and everything is manageable, right? Because ultimately it all comes back to you. So yeah, reach out if there's anything you think we can do to help.
Great. Thanks again, Jean-Francois, and speak soon. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.